Let's look at some of these executive orders. Let's look at some of these Trump executive orders. All right, so this is just an article from NPR titled All of the Day One Executive Actions. All right, so let's look at some of these Trump executive day one executive orders, executive actions, however you want to label it. And this is from an NPR politics article that I was sent. And it's all of the day one executive actions Trump has announced so far. And this came out January 20th, 2025, around 5:07 p.m. Eastern time. All right, so we'll just go down. They numbered them, so I would just pick some numbers that stands out to me. So the first one is declare a national emergency at the border. It says the officials on the call said this action will allow U.S. armed forces to finish the border wall and allow the Secretary of Defense to deploy members of the armed forces and National Guard to the border. All right, there's nothing too shocking or surprising about that. I mean, he's been campaigning and talking about the border thing. I mean, that was one of his core platforms, always have been. So this isn't too shocking, especially if you consider like some of the actions that Texas and states who joined Texas took. I think it was, I mean, time has been kind of meshing, but earlier 2024, maybe even in 2023, where they were sending the Texas National Guard and Texas Rangers and the Texas military to the border. And then we had other states, primarily southern and western states, saying that they're going to support, and they start sending members of the National Guard. I think Governor Kemp in Georgia, sent some personnel over there too. So that's not too shocking, or as it relates to, being out of line with his policy or some of the things he talked about. But I think some of the things to be mindful of, and I've had this conversation, I got this conversation recorded, actually, this is about 3 years ago, right? And my whole thing was, I had a conversation with Brian Says, and my whole thing was that we're going to likely see boots on the ground in Mexico within the next 5 years, probably sooner. I got the audio. I probably upload the audio. I never published it because I just never published it. I think it wasn't polished, at least to my mind. But I will upload it because it was a very interesting conversation about China, about, we was just shooting a breeze about stuff and cracking jokes and stuff. But my whole point was that I was making is we're likely going to see boots on the ground in Mexico, but some things had to happen in order for it to happen. And I think we actually talked about them declaring like drug cartel members as terrorists, right? And that's one of the executive orders. That's important because that takes precedence, right? There's these terminologies that, presidents, no matter who the president is, that they throw out, like terrorist, insurgent. These are legal terms. These are legal and political terms, right? If it's one thing to say criminals, because who deals with criminals is police, right? You see what I'm saying? Like local police, state police, and maybe if it's too big, you will get the feds involved. But police deals with criminals. They're all criminals. Terrorists are criminals, right? They're all criminals, but the terminology means something because it creates precedence. So who deals with criminals? The police. Who deals with terrorists? Military. It could be that simple, right? We can keep it that simple. Militaries, presidents, special forces, SEAL team this and that, they deal with terrorists, right? So that's a real designation. So by signing an executive order, and I'll find it. Yeah, here we go. Number 4 on this NPR list is designate criminal cartels as terrorists This will allow the U.S. to more easily remove members of groups like I'm not even going to say the title of that group, transitional criminal organizations from Venezuela, and so on and so forth. So, like, that gives them precedent to say, yo, this is a terrorist, this is a threat to national security, so we're gonna have to, same way they did, when they sent SEALs in to go after this guy and that guy, and certain missile strikes and things like that to happen, that expands the jurisdiction and give them the freedom to say, hey, look, this is for national interest, this is a terrorist, and under certain Geneva conventions and UN security councils and all this sort of stuff like that, we have the right to go and do X, Y, and Z. And so, yeah, and that was my whole premise in that conversation. So that's, to me, that's a very big deal, especially if you listen to the rhetoric and the tone that this administration is taking towards Mexico, especially if you think about some of the imperialist. I don't want to use that term lightly. I don't use imperialist in a political term. I use it more in terms of functionality, because I know that term is loaded. When a lot of times when liberals use imperialism, they make it one with colonialism, and that's not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily the case. I get that, but that's not necessarily the case. They're related. In some ways, they can be inextricably linked, but I'm talking about just expanding borders, being aggressive, plan your flag, just in that very elementary term of imperial ambitions. And this administration have talked about seizing massive swaths of land and zones and things like that. Coming from the American administration, that we haven't heard talk like that in a long time. Like I said, since like McKinley, at least that overtly. Nevertheless, yeah, that's very important, right? I think that's a very big deal. It could be in how propaganda and rhetoric and media work, and you look at Texas at the border, and like I said, the moves they've been making at the border, the even changing the Gulf of Mexico to the American Gulf or Gulf of America. A lot of people say, well, that don't really mean nothing. It's just on surface, and people still going to call it this and that and that and that. But again, in politics, a lot of the stuff, like a lot of this, I don't want to say everything is calculated, but a lot of these announcements, most of these announcements are very intentional. They have a reason behind them. He's not just saying, I'm gonna name this mountain this, I'm gonna name this golf this, right? This just as well as liberal, the word liberal means something, or Democrat or Republican or conservative or Marxist or whatever, capitalist. These words have symbolic and political capital in them. And a move like that from America, that's signifying something, right? If you think about it culturally, socially, it's kind of like he's moving to blockade Mexico, right? You taking a Gulf, a name, even if it's a name only, you're taking a Gulf, right? You taking this huge body of water, asserting yourself in this huge body of water, which technically America already is with its Navy, and then you're sealing off the border, right? You're making moves to seal off the border. Then you're talking about this multinational criminal element that is heavily rooted in Mexico, the cartels, these paramilitary forces. We have the right to designate these as, preemptive strike targets. Essentially, that's what that executive order is about. So, and nobody is really talking about like a military conflict between the United States and Mexico, like they should. But anyway, let's keep moving. Suspend refugee resettlement. The official said, I don't know if this was a typo. The official said the U.S. would suspend refugee resettlement for at least 4 months. Again, a lot of these at least what NPR is choosing to cover, has a lot to do with like immigration and the border, which makes sense. It's NPR. End asylum and close the border to those without legal status via proclamation. Again, end birthright citizenship. This is interesting because one of the unique things about America, and again, depending on which side you fall on in this argument, is that that's wrong, it's right, it's beautiful, it's not. It's the whole notion of you being born in a nation, and by right, you're born in that nation means you're a citizen of that nation, right? And I didn't know that America was. I mean, I heard Trump said, but I don't know. I'll have to look into it myself. But he said we're the only nation on the planet that does that, right? If that's the case, I didn't know how unique that was, right, to us, right? I thought that was just how it was. I thought that was, and maybe that's just the my point of view growing up in a nation that is like that, right? And I didn't have this understanding of the worldview, but I thought that was a if I'm born on this land, I thought this was a natural thing, right? If I'm born in China, I'm Chinese, right? If I'm born here, I'm that, right? I thought that was like a natural thing, but apparently, at least according to Trump, that's only exclusive to us, right? And which I like that. I like that idea, but I can see where they're coming from in terms of like, yo, let's ban that because people are making, taking advantage of that. I've known immigrants, particularly African immigrants, who will marry an American woman or whatever just to get a green card, right? And then you got that spousal thing there too, where you can marry into the American thing. I don't know how ties into it, but they would have a baby, which they call them colloquially anchor babies, right? Because I'm anchored, I got a baby here, I got to be a parent here, and the law say, well, you're a citizen, but so I that's interesting, and there has been a lot of people who've taken advantage of that. I've known people personally who've taken advantage of that, right or wrong. I mean, it wasn't wrong because they wasn't breaking a law or anything like that, right? To do that, that's call it a loophole or whatever you want to call it. But it's not like they was breaking a law, but that's what people do. No matter who you are, we take advantage of loopholes, right? That's the whole American system. Okay, where we at? In birthright citizenship, okay. Enhanced vetting and screening. Yeah, this NPR article is mostly just about the immigration stuff. Enhanced vetting and screening. Hold on. Protect American citizens against invasion. Officials said that. Okay, this one is interesting. Officials said this equips agents and officers of ICE and CBP with the authorities. What? And CBP with the authorities. I don't know how they're writing. Maybe it's me reading. But anyway, they need to deport people from the United States. Equips agents and officers of ICE and CBP with the authorities. And this is quoted. They need to deport people from the U.S. Okay, so this is interesting because again, it's if you think about it, and maybe this is an over exaggeration or hyperbole from my point of view, but it's almost like they're militarizing ICE, right? ICE is going to become almost like a hybrid National Guard, special force, if you will, in the sense that essentially that is the main function of ICE, is to guard the nation from illegal immigration and people who cross the border for nefarious reasons to a degree. I mean, there's other agencies involved in that, but I'm just saying that's what ICE, immigration, right? They deal with people, criminals or illegal people crossing the border. So they have a similar function to National Guard, which National Guard is really like the state militia, local militia, army force. Whereas ICE is more of an agency, they more specialized, more nuanced. But under this administration, under even Republican governors, I can see ICE becoming more militaristic. I can see a lot of money flowing for ICE to get weapons and systems that they've never had. They don't have, it's like kids, you just dropping a brand new, you know, a big boy toy to a kid, a toddler or something. They got to, they try to learn. They feet can't even touch the pedal yet. But I can see ICE, becoming militarized. And also, if you look at protect American citizens against invasion, again, this ties back into the whole designating cartels as terrorists, because that, again, that it sets the impetus, right? It set the impetus to invade. These are preemptive measures. These are preemptive measures to, like, it's crazy because, and he's also strong arming them with the tariffs. This is war on Mexico. However you want to slice it, this is a declaration of war on Mexico. America is declaring war on Mexico. I probably should have led with that. America is declaring war on Mexico. You talk about the Gulf, like, look at the symbols, look at the actions, the tariffs. Tariffs is a form of economic warfare. Okay, it's already, the border is becoming militarized. Now you're talking about one of the elements, the main, and I'm not calling Mexicans cartels or everything that come from Mexico as criminal, but these are groups. These are groups that originate from Mexico, right? These are Mexican groups, however you want to slice it. These are Mexican groups, paramilitary groups. The cartels are, right? Even though they may not be associated overtly with the national government or the state of Mexico. Same way you had certain groups like the Taliban and all these other groups wasn't officially associated with the nation of Afghanistan or Pakistan or wherever, right? This is war. This is war. And in politics, there's something that's called soft power. There's something that's called hard power. There's soft actions and there are hard actions in courses of actions you take in politics, right? Just because it's these are soft actions. This is preparation, right? Just pay attention to Mexico. And protect America, I said that. Restore the death penalty. This action in particular directs the Attorney General to seek capital punishment for the murder of law enforcement officers and capital crimes committed by illegal aliens. It encouraged state agencies and district attorneys to bring capital state charges for these crimes, the official said. So this didn't say anything about the TikTok, and it probably was the time it came out. They probably put it out as it was happening or whatever, but he signed an executive order on TikTok. I like to get into that, just break that down also. But so far, just based on this article, I'm going to find more out. I'm going to do multiple parts to that. But so far, this is the executive orders in my viewpoint on them.